fun stuff. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited. I'm always excited. I know, but I'm excited because today we have one of my favorite middle school teachers, Ashley Nichol, and she is just amazing. And I am so excited for you guys to get to talk to her and hear about her teaching experience and the things that she loves about teaching and the things that she struggles with about teaching, as many of you have those things. So, Ashley, thank you so much for coming today. I am so happy to see you. And you teach my favorite grade, which is eighth grade. I love eighth graders.
I do too. And thank you for that very warm introduction. I am really happy to be here today. So,
Good, good. So eighth graders are very unique because they're still kind of at that time where they're like, especially the boys, I love it because they're like, everything I do to communicate with another guy, I have to have my hands on them all the
oh,
time and everything. And as we know, that's not something we really want to have in school and can be a huge struggle. And they're never regulated. Like it's always like, I feel really great. I feel really awful. I feel really great. I feel really awful. And that, of course, is true for both sexes and everything. So, how do you manage that when you have kids in your classroom that are definitely not attuned to learning and everything? And you're pretty much a pro. And I know that you would probably say, I don't consider myself a pro, Bethany, because you're one of the most humble people I know, but you are a pro. So, how do you manage that when they come in and they have just those very differing energy levels that are not conducive for teaching?
well, it's funny because you talk about eighth grade and I love eighth grade too. One of the things I love about them is my ability to be kind of blunt and sarcastic, and it's okay generally. So
And they
one of
get
the things I often do is I'll just call attention. Why do boys have to just touch each other all the time, right? And they give me this deer in the headlights look as their hands are on somebody else, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" So so that is something that I say often. Why do just stop touching each other,
My favorite
But
is when they look at the hands like, who do those belong to? Oh
sometimes,
crap, they're
yeah.
mine.
Oh, see, I did that, yeah. The ownership of behavior is a nebulous thing at this stage, but I tend to find with kids, so my class is structured that we have some really natural transitions. We start off with a little bit of a transition period. They have a 5 minute timer to get to their space. And in that time, they can chat, we do the Wordle together. And so like it gives them a little bit of social time before I ask them to settle in. And then the first thing we do is read silently. And it takes a minute or two for some kids, but the fact that the whole room is silent and we're all sitting and we're all reading is a really nice way to then enter into the work that we do. So I love that structure. And then I try to provide clear, like, this is a transition moment where we're going to break. You can stand up and move. You can get this material. You can get out of your seat. So for some of those more fidgety kids, and sometimes I actually, with what I see with a lot of eighth graders is a lack of energy. They're tired and they're not engaging, and I'm getting a lot of like blank stares. And so one of the things I love to do is like everybody stand up and we're going to take some really deep breaths. We're going to stretch our hands over our heads. We're going to touch our toes, like in the weird like nerdy teacher way that we're all going to do it. Everybody's doing it together. Deep breath in, deep breath out. And like, okay, now have a seat. Let's try this again, and they'll get a few giggles and eye rolls, and but it changes the tone and it shifts some of the energy, because it's surprising. I I will have a few kids every now and then that are really high energy, but I actually have a lot of low energy eighth
Yeah,
graders,
they're
especially.
transitioning to that high school time where
Yeah,
the vestibular works
yeah,
and because their bodies are adjusting and they're really wanting to sleep later in the morning and go to bed later at night. And
yeah,
that's tough. You guys start early, so it's tough for them. So it takes them till like 11 o'clock before they're like, oh yeah, I'm awake.
yeah, yeah,
And everything. So do you notice a change in kids in the last 5 or 10 years?
yeah, definitely. I feel like post-COVID, I'm starting to see a change again, but post-COVID, I felt like there was a real lack of resilience and grit in kids. And it was so that it sort of was layers. There was either a layer of apathy.
Ashley, can you still hear me? It just completely froze.
sorry.
That's okay.
Internet here is spotty sometimes.
For sure. I can never get internet in that building.
Okay.
So
So to go back to your question, have I seen a change in kids in the last few years? Absolutely. A loss of like grit and resilience and sort of an inability to either bounce back or want to bounce back. And also kind of a little bit of a disconnect. You always get the questions in middle school of why do I need to know this and why does this matter? But in the last few years, it's felt more so like the kids really feel like, well, I could just be home on my computer. I could just be playing games. I want to just be texting my friends. And they really are disconnecting from what skills am I learning here and how does this help me in life and where does it take me? And this school year has actually been a really nice bright light because I have kids who want to do well, who care about doing well, who want to put in effort. And I have not seen as much of that the last 3, 4, 5 years before. There was like a lot of kids who just didn't care to try again, and I don't know if that was a result of COVID. I think some of it was. I think,
it was, I think they got into that pattern of being home and everything. We were so lucky as a district where we came back full
Mhm.
time and everything. And I think that you're seeing that attention to detail and wanting to participate and wanting to connect and the less of the escapism than
Yeah.
other districts that were in the hybrid model for a long time.
And I think too, adolescents think they can self-regulate and multitask, and they can't. Their brain
Correct.
can't do it, but they think they can. And so they got this tiny bit of autonomy with that, with going remote for that time that we did, because we were just remote from the March to June, and then we were back sort of as much in person as we could be. And I think that break, and when we went remote for that stretch of time, it was very loosey-goosey because nobody knew what we were doing and we were just
And
all
that was
trying our best. And
everywhere.
yeah, and but I think they got that taste of like nobody's telling me what I have to do and I can just do this when I want to and maybe when I don't want to. And they developed this idea of thinking they could turn it on when they needed to and still play games and text and do all the things when their brains can't. Their brains just aren't ready and nobody can really multitask. You can just switch tasks, we know this. So
Really
uh,
terrible for your brain too. I mean, we put so much emphasis on it, but it is not
yeah.
helping your brain at all.
And the heavy reliance on technology but out of necessity and then becoming a crutch and now unlearning the crutch of it because the skill, like the ability to, we talk all the time as a team, like kids can't memorize anymore. Well, do they need to because they can just get information on their phone right away? But yeah, they kind of need their brain to be able to engage in those thought patterns and learning what short-term memory versus long-term memory can do. And so but I am starting to see this year has felt like a shift. This year has felt like we're kind of swinging back to time before pre-COVID times.
Yeah, that's great. And it's such a good thing because I talk to so many kids and they'll say to me, well, my biggest thing that regulates me is my phone. If I can just play games or check social media for a minute, and I'm like, that does not regulate you at all. Your body tells me that you're not regulated at all. You may believe that, but that is not accurate. To say the least. Do you feel like kids are struggling more with safety concerns than they had been in the past?
When you say safety, can you give me?
Safety, like feeling like I hear many more kids nowadays saying things like, well, that's just my anxiety. Well, that's
Mm,
my depression. Well, that's my this. Well, that's my that. Whereas 5 or 6 years ago, I don't think a student would have classified themselves in.
yeah. I definitely think it's become, and I hate to use this word, but it's definitely become more part of pop culture, to talk about those types of things. And I think what's hard about it with middle schoolers and eighth graders is it's so valid. You are right. You probably have anxiety. You are right. You are probably struggling with this aspect of, but it's also that's part of your development and growth. That's the stage that you're in. That's the hormones in your body, and it's not a crutch for or an excuse for not being able to do something. But I feel like it's talked about more, it's heard about more. Um, as someone who suffered from anxiety myself for a really long time and actually didn't know that until I was an adult, like going through therapy and having my therapist be like, that's anxiety. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, like I just thought that's the way my brain was wired. It's sometimes hard when it feels like it's overused as an excuse for ignoring behaviors, but also I think it is important that we as a society recognize that there is trauma post-COVID. There is an impact on mental health and an impact on social connection. And social media and phones have made social connections much harder to create.
Harder.
And so I
And
think I see an
skills
uptick.
are vastly different than what they were prior to that, for sure. And I would also say that, kids have this feeling of like, when's the next time we're going to be stuck at home forever? Like
Yeah.
there is this very different opinion of, why do I have to do that? Because how do I know how long it's going to last?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And I think for them, like, um, it was a real interruption and a huge one. It wasn't just a historical event that happened someplace else that had lingering impacts, but it was it for all of them. And I can't imagine being their age, 12, 13, 14 years old, and having the world shut down and being afraid of getting ill or having family members get ill, or yeah, it's definitely has a huge impact. And um I I don't know how you address an entire society's anxiety. I don't know how you address that,
and
but
well, and I often say that I think that, especially because we've seen so many kids exiting the educational system prior to graduating and things like that at the higher levels, and that we're going to see a shift in our cultures in the next 10 years, 5, 10 years, where people are having more of an awakening of what is really matter, what is our higher purpose, and that sort of thing, because we're going to these individuals who haven't completed schooling, who don't have the skills to function in society, are going to be in our society. Those are going
yeah.
to be people that we're going to the post office with, we're at restaurants with, and we're going into grocery stores. And so we're going to have a very different interaction with people and how our societies function because of
Yeah.
that. So, and hopefully we'll realize that and it'll get better and we'll provide more and more supports and everything else. But sometimes it takes the painfulness of it before we can get to that point.
Well, and I have always thought, not always, I had a thought after COVID and we were trying to come back into school and we were trying to like everybody was like, well, we're gonna go back to as normal as we can. And part of me is like, but was normal what we really needed? Was
Yeah.
normal the right thing? Like educationally, the way we structure our day, the time that we start, the things that we do, like is that actually what's best for adolescents? Like, hey, we have almost a clean slate here. Like
We
maybe
can
we
make it
can,
whatever we want. We can take the best
yeah.
of the whole
And
world.
but I also understand that comfort level of I want to do what's familiar, and
Yeah.
that's how we're going to get back to normal is to just go right into the routine of familiar. And
And
which one's better? And we don't, it's hard to say.
do understand that the familiar is not always the best. And oftentimes getting your body and your brain and everything else to change. And I address this a lot in my book of how do you get that to change? You have to break your routines. You have to change your patterns and stuff. And it feels uncomfortable. It feels
Oh,
painful.
yeah.
But the benefit of it long term is huge, like being able to get to a much different level than you were able to. And we're asking kids to do that every day. Come in and learn something different, try something new, stand in front of a class, do these things. We want you to take those risks. And that's so hard for many of them, especially face-to-face risks, because many
Yeah.
have gotten comfortable with taking risks online and things like that. But for them to take a risk, with people who actually see them and interact with them and give them body language, that's tough.
Yeah.
Really
And
tough.
I think kids are less adept at those social cues, at reading that body language. And so there is a higher level of fear around it because they're not as confident that they can read the room and read the space and the other people. And it's this really like vicious cycle. I'm more comfortable on my social media, but it's also making me less comfortable in person and therefore reinforcing my need for social media or that kind of interaction. I'm very happy that I was on the other side, like my age group. I didn't grow up with any of that. It didn't happen until I was at very end of high school, beginning of college. I'm so happy I did not grow up in the time that you are. Like, this is hard for me to navigate.
It's a huge commitment and it's a huge time suck and everything else. So it's a very different world for them than what we experienced. And it will be a very different landscape once they're out of school too, as far as how they interact and approach and do things in life and all of that. So but I am glad that you are probably the first teacher I've interviewed that has said that things have gotten better this year.
Good.
So
I'm
kudos,
glad.
kudos to you. It probably has something to do with you, Ashley.
Well, I will also qualify. 2 years ago, I was only in school for part of it because I had a baby. So I missed an entire trimester. And that year was hard for all its own reasons. And then, but I feel a change in the kids. So some of it's me, some of it's I feel a little more regulated. My kid's not getting as sick as much as she was last year. I'm not out as often, knock on wood. But also, I'm starting to see a change in some of the kids. And this year's group is refreshing in that they're motivated and engaged and they care.
Yeah,
There's a level of like desire to want to be successful, which is helpful because it's really hard to teach kids who don't care if they're successful or not.
very hard to teach kids who don't care. Yeah. And I will say that I agree with that because I'm not in your building very much this year. And
Yeah.
usually you don't see me, things are going well. It's usually the rule of thumb. People are like, it's so long. And I'm like, that's good for you. But I'm always here if you need me. Ashley, is there anything else you'd like to share with our community?
Oh, no, you caught me at 2:20 where my brain has shut itself off.
When that bell rings, those of you that are teachers, we know that's the time,
Yeah.
yeah, where we
Well,
say,
now I got to shift into mom brain mode. So now I'm wondering what's for dinner. If you could help me answer that,
well,
it's not the meaning of life that you have to
so
answer these.
it
It's
is my 9-year-old's birthday today. And I said, what do you want for dinner for tonight? What special thing do you want? And she said, something yummy. And I said, okay, what do you find yummy? And she said, like maybe corn, baked broccoli, some rice. You know those long, stringy green things you have, Mom, with the stuff on the end? I said, do you mean asparagus? She said, yeah, that. So it'll be a real interesting dinner for us tonight.
That's so fun. Something yummy.
This probably be a dinner like we've never had before. It's just
Hey, well,
carbs and some vegetables,
there you go. Well, it could be worse. She could
Like,
have said ice cream.
true
Oh,
story.
that probably would have been great too.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we will catch you soon. And if you want to see more of what Ashley Nichols has in store, check out our other videos that we have, shorts and longs with her, and see you soon.
Thank you.
I'm trying to pause that.